Thank you. Well, good afternoon. It's been a thrilling day. Thank you for staying around. What I'm going to talk about is what the other speakers have spoken about, but we're going to take you back to the ancient world and how they knew and understood this kind of science thousands of years ago, how they've hidden it and encrypted it, some mystical awareness within pyramids, within stone monoliths, within biblical scripture, within myths and legends throughout the world. So it's on the same theme. It's the theme of consciousness and enlightenment, but it's from an ancient perspective where they've actually left us these clues of what these grand scientists today have told you, especially Anthony. This is really what it is. It's an ancient code, but again, it's the emphasis on a consciousness, enlightenment, and a mystical awareness. It's quite apparent that there's a grand manipulation of reality going on. Whatever reality is or whatever it turns to be, it is being manipulated by people who are forging our reality. If you control perception by controlling information, you basically forge someone's reality for them. So if that information is deliberately false, then your perception, it stands to reason, is also largely false. This system that we operate in, this third dimensional system, that the rulers of it really understand and got it to a fine tee after many thousands of years, are creating an illusion for us to perceive reality in the way in which they wish us to perceive reality. Even the adepts and the wise men at the top of these societies are keeping secrets from each other unless you get to the real top. Most, like all religions, all mysteries, conceals its secret from all except the adepts and sages or the elect, and uses false explanation and misinterpretations of its symbols to mislead those who only deserve to be misled. That is society. But with new information, the information that you've heard today, the information that you're going to hear from this point on, your reality will automatically change. The common uniting element in all creation is consciousness, it's an awareness. This is how we turn water into wine. Water being collective unconsciousness, the wine, the vineyard, being symbolic of higher consciousness. That is Christ turning water into wine. What we deem as modern science, and we heard about modern science previously, is really an ancient secret. They understood about this wonderful science many thousands of years ago. But it was kept in the temples for the initiates, for the mystery schools, for those who understood the language of the mysteries. In order to see the truth, you must recognise the lie, or at least you must realise that there is a lie. That is the first thing that we need to do. Now again, throughout this talk, I'm going to go a lot into biblical scripture and how it's really encrypted with this kind of information. The disciples came to him and asked, "Why do you speak to the people in parables?" He replied, "The knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them." The same kind of version of the same thing. The secret of the kingdom of God has been given to you, but to those on the outside, everything is said in parables. What is a parable? It's a story that hides a spiritual lesson. Now, biblical characters are not real. They are metaphors that hide a spiritual lesson. Let there be light. In other words, let there be secret, as light is the secret to redemption. Just a little bit about me before we move on. This is how it started for me. A career of 17 years in London and Birmingham. And I was a little bit younger then, but it was a long, long time ago. I was married to that particular career. I was a trained investigator of 17 years' experience. I was considered an expert eyewitness in any court in the United Kingdom. The skill of an investigator is to make connections, and that is what I've done in terms of the ancient past. I call it an ancient blueprint because wherever you go in the world, in the ancient past, whatever part of the world you go to, they are all telling us the same message. The only thing that ever changed was the shape of the monuments. I've seen many things that you would not associate with this world. I've seen dimensional gateways, I've seen shadow people, I've had telepathic invites to certain locations, I've stood next to extraterrestrial beings, all kinds of things that I've seen. I've even been taken back 159 years into the past, and as Guy would say, somebody else's effect. It would also appear the soul of these ancient cultures. This is an Egyptian hieroglyph where you can clearly see between the two ladies is the enhanced version there, clearly some kind of extraterrestrial being. Obviously they drew it because they saw it or they had some kind of experience. These are cave paintings that are thousands of years old. It can be argued in modern society with all the films, Communion, all the different films of aliens, that it can be a figment of the imagination. They didn't have movies thousands and thousands of years ago, so where did these images come from? And as I said, I've actually stood next to extraterrestrial beings in out of this world. They do walk amongst us, although it's not quite as obvious as this. Scientists now believe that human DNA is arranged in such a precise way that it reveals a set of arrhythmic patterns and ideographic symbolic language, which is what hieroglyphs are. These studies have led scientists to believe that we were literally invented outside of Earth several billion years ago. Now, an ideogram or ideograph is what we have in the Nazca lines. It is a language. It holds information within the frequencies. That is a language to be deciphered within those pictorials. Scientific research in Kazakhstan, of all places, believe that human DNA was encoded with an alien signal for an ancient extraterrestrial civilization, and they refer to it as a biological SETI. SETI stands for Research for Extraterrestrial Intelligence. I think, my personal opinion, is that there has been many species created with similar genetic or DNA that are settled in different regions of the universe. This is known scientifically as panspermia. It is the seed that has travelled throughout the universe. And again, it's been referred to several times today, but what science calls junk DNA is really a protein-based dormant language that can be activated by sound. There is a language yet to be deciphered within junk DNA. The ancient temples, the monuments and the monoliths were resonance chambers for sonic ascension and DNA activation. But the one thing they all do is they all point to the sky. That is the one contributor. Now again in 2009, which was my massive year of awakening, which actually ended my police career, all the paranormal things that was going on to me, caused me to leave and walk out of a job that I expected to be there forever. I was shown... Could you speak on? Yes, of course, yeah. In 2009, I was given a golden key in the mind's eye. Now, a golden key is symbolic of Gnostic knowledge, which is how the adepts and the sages passed on knowledge to each other. This is the symbol of worthiness to receive sacred ancient knowledge. Now, the things that we call paranormal are only paranormal if you are unaligned with the whole of reality. If you are aligned, the paranormal soon becomes very, very normal. In 2010, just after my awakening, I received a cryptic message 2 weeks before I went on holiday to Egypt. It was from a psychic medium who I'd never met, didn't know me, I'd never spoke to before, and she said that she had a message for me from her spiritual council. This is the message of verbatim. Regarding your trip to Egypt, you will help uncover more insights and translate ancient knowledge brought to us from great distance. Under the Sphinx lies an ancient secret knowledge that will be added to your toolbox. Use this wisely for the benefit of all meaning past, present and future. It all belongs together in the same place, which is consistent with what we've heard about time previously. You must absorb, accept, understand and finally know. Only then can you share and teach. This was in 2010, 2 weeks before I went on holiday to Egypt. This medium didn't know I was going to Egypt. These days, in a dream state, if that's what they really are, I get the likes of mathematical encoded messages planted into my head. The last one was simply a square root symbol with the letters 937 next to it. Several hours later the next day, I actually worked out what it meant, which is this, and it takes you all the way back to the mystery schools of ancient Egypt. It was a mathematical message given to me in a dream state. And then I got to thinking, what if all exists within a creative, infinite, mathematical and geometric mind? All of this is actually in a larger mind, a larger consciousness. But what if the mind of that creative force is not perfect? Either and never can be until all is brought into harmony and balance. Perfection means flawless. This world, this creation, this reality is not flawless. So therefore, the creative mind must therefore also be imperfect. This creative mind may also be striving for that inner balance. Balance is important throughout of the ancient awakening. A divine human is someone who is in control of their thoughts, which is Teote as an Egyptian god. Therefore, the divine creator must be in control of his or hers. Now, human beings are simply a universe in miniature. But we've allowed the free radical cells to rule us, and those are the ones that are keeping this kind of information away from us. But we really are the universe. We are literally a miniature replica of what happens in space. These are not those scientists, but this is the closest thing I could find to Russia. But these two scientists have said that there is a planetary physical physics called vacuum domains. They are self-luminous formations. They found that vacuum domains, given the abbreviation VD, which is not the best, but these vacuum domains were luminous effects created by combined forces of electromagnetism and gravitational principles, and they can manifest localized mini black holes at gravity spin, creating a vacuum effect and a pulse heat release. Black hole frequencies are B flat in musical terms. They are 460 hertz, and this is actually a sound wave measured leaving a black hole, and science tells you that there's no sound in space. 460 hertz is an isochronic tone, which is all to do with brainwave entrainment, which is the synchronicity of brainwaves. It's an audio-based way to stimulate your brain and to guide your dominant brainwave activity to a different frequency, changing your mental state. It puts you in a meditative state. When you get close to the black hole, you start to hit that 460 hertz. 460 hertz as the frequency slows down time and aging. That is why time slows down when you get near to a black hole. Now, we also have these in DNA, which again is proof of a miniature universe. In DNA, the vacuum domains can cause patterns in the vacuum, producing magnetized wormholes. Wormholes are the microscopic equivalent of universal wormholes. In other words, the black holes, the wormholes of space, which I have seen, and I've seen craft coming out of them, is actually inside our DNA as well. There are tunnel connections between entirely different areas in the universe through which information can be transmitted outside of space and time. The DNA attracts these bits of information and passes them onto our consciousness. Our DNA, the black holes of our DNA, are collecting information from universal black holes. They are exchanging information. It is called hypercommunication. They are susceptible to psychokinetic energy, in other words, brainwaves. And these effects can be seen when we focus consciousness. Therefore, these can be controlled by the mind. Vacuum domains, as I say, are self-radiant balls of light, which is ionized gas, and can be guided by thought and can react to thought as the wavelengths are similar. So when we see images such as this, those orbs are not camera tricks. They're basically focused consciousness creating self-radiant balls of light, vacuum domains inside the brain, which are connecting to the gigantic wormholes of space. Now, these are two plasma balls of light that were seen and filmed creating a crop circle. Now, if we are creating vacuum domains, these self-radiant balls of light in our mind, what mind is controlling these to create these intrinsic shapes? And it goes back to the Second World War, when pilots reported Foo Fighters, which are the exact same thing, balls of light. So my spin on the subject is that the stars and planets are really vacuum domain light within a greater mind. And the stars and the planets are circular orbs, and the black holes of space are really the mini black holes of a larger DNA. Our DNA has black holes, and the creative mind, which is the universe, also has black holes, which exchange information with the brain. In my father's house, there are many rooms. Again, a biblical quote. What does that mean? The house is synonymous with the mind, and rooms are space that can be occupied. We're talking about potential multiverse and other universes and all of these different rooms that the Father, the creative mind, has within his mind. Our body is a universe for atoms and cells. Basically, we are a miniature universe. But humans are imprisoned by the five senses. But it's been helped by a grand deception that is keeping us within those five senses and never releasing us to see beyond this kind of information. We can see it in many sort of modern day societies. This is obviously President Trump, see Adolf Hitler in the middle. They're basically doing hidden symbols in public as a way of communicating with each other. That is the upside down triangle, Satan's triangle, which is really the Arthurian palace, which is talking about the feminine. And I'll get onto a bit later on in the talk at the end, if we have time, and tell you who Satan is, and I'll tell you who Jesus Christ is. It's not what you think. But Satan works through the lower triangle, which is woman, in order to make the upper triangle, the man, fall. It is the Star of David shape, which is sexual seduction, the lower sexual appetite, which is ruled by Satan. This places the initiates into sexual temptation, which when defeated emerges as the light of our inner Christ when we defeat our own Satan. However, this kind of temptation does sometimes bring down, or potentially can bring down, the powerful. There are many animal souls still today in human form. So when the human race learns to read the language of symbolism, a great veil will fall from the eyes of men, manly, pure. The whole of society is encoded within symbols, within metaphors. And this sacred information that's going to be shared from now is really just meant for the chosen initiates, not for the public. The priesthoods, the ancient priesthoods that held this knowledge, that created Christianity, who they believed Prometheus gave them the fire of the gods, which was the wisdom of the gods, to rule the planet with this kind of knowledge. It is the biblical three crosses, the symbology of the biblical three crosses, where we rely on the organs of perception and not the spiritual sight. The organs of perception are the eyes, the spiritual sight is the Christ, as you will learn later, which is the third eye. Only through true knowledge can you ascend, can you raise your vibration, can you move out of the prison of the five senses, and that is a Gnostic principle. And when we see the likes of skull caps, again, a lot of this is all symbology in the modern day. The skull cap, symbology of 360 degrees of knowledge, is the knowledge of the orb, the esoteric and alchemical knowledge of the powers of the great orb, often shown to us on churches as this. But our reality is controlled by history, it is controlled by religions, it is controlled by the news. That is where most people get that information from. And it's quite easy to control people's reality, which is quite self-evident. So to believe is believe, which is to be absent. But when you know what they know, your reality changes, it automatically changes to what they know. This is the symbol of many mystery schools. It is the pentagram. It is really the Star of Bethlehem. Why is it the Star of Bethlehem? Because it leads wise men to their inner divine realization, to their inner Christ consciousness. That is the Star of Bethlehem, which is the pentagram. And why could King Herod not see or find the Star of Bethlehem? Because symbolically, Herod represents the masses. He lacked the wisdom to see the mysteries. That is the symbology of the particular story. The pentagram are the five wounds of Christ. And again, all ancient sites are related to each other, built along a grid composed of two pentagrams. Every ancient site on Earth will fall within those two pentagrams. The number 5, repent, which in other words is to redirect inwards to the throne of his glory, which is the inner regenerative state, which is enlightenment. The throne of his glory, the seat of the soul, is the pineal gland, which again has been mentioned several times today. That is why the Egyptians really had black eyeliner around their eyes. That is symbolic of Osiris, which is the third eye of the pineal gland, who is associated with the colour black. That is the third eye of the Egyptians. We need to step out of the 4, the control of the material world, which is the number 5, which is the ether, which is why we see in many modern day logos The letter E is always different to the other letters because the letter E is the fifth letter of the alphabet, which is the number 5, which is the pentagram. It is the ether, it is the higher knowledge of stepping out of the material world. Even when we look at one of the most famous religious songs, Hallelujah, the final chord has 5 notes comprised of 5 different frequencies that have wavefronts that, when superimposed, form a 5-pointed geometric star, a pentagram. The ancients knew a bioscience, which is a spiritual science. They used sound to basically create sound alchemy, which is to elevate themselves through sonics, through sound. Even the mystery of the elongated skulls, which I'll go into in a little while in the Egyptian section, is all to do with sound. We even see elongated skulls in RKM in Russia, we see it in Stonehenge, we see it in Egypt, and we also see them in Peru. It's really, the ancients were talking about activating Kundalini, which is the coiled serpent of the 7 spiritual wheels. Number 7 is spiritual perfection. This serpent was called the devil by early Christians. And I've personally seen Kundalini energy. It is a white chemical fire, and the reason it's white is because white is the colour of balance. When this Kundalini rises from the base of the spine, it burns the lower chakras. Therefore, Sodom and Gomorrah, the lower chakras, are destroyed by fire. Frequency plays an extremely big part in consciousness. When we look at Simon carrying the cross of Christ, Simon in Hebrew is Shimon, which means to listen, sound. When we see beautiful structures like churches and Islamic buildings that have all of this wonderful geometry, it's really a resonance structure. And that geometry has a wavelength of pure consciousness. It's a triphalmatic entrainment frequency that raises consciousness of the people inside the church. And here are all the frequencies of the platonic solids and the geometric shapes of our 3rd dimension. Everything has a sound, everything has a frequency. The old priests of the old monasteries had what is known as the solfeggio scale, which is really ancient monasterial tones that impart spiritual blessings. They were raising consciousness through sound. And this sound, this encrypted message, is hidden in the book of Numbers of the Bible, between those chapters and those verses. They were opening up their inner portals of wisdom, the pineal gland, which was a route for them, a route to enlightenment through sound. They were the masters of frequency and the masters of sound. When we look at Sirius A, which is important when I get to Egypt later, Sirius A is the sun behind the sun. It is the 33rd degree ascension frequency. We then start going into the Hopi Indian Kachina prophecy, the red star of the Hopi Indians. It is unity consciousness, the place of non-duality. Even in Masonic art, we see Sirius, the blazing star. Sirius means scorching. It is the blazing star. Even when we look at Disney, who was a 33-degree Mason, we see the blue fairy is the haze of Sirius A. And Pinocchio means pine eye, the pineal gland. That is also why we have the blue lodges of Masonry, the blue haze of Sirius, the 33-degree ascension frequency. Even Washington, D.C., on the left, you will see the hieroglyph for Sirius, and on the right, you will see Washington, D.C. Man arrives at Sirius as the perfect human being. When we look at Isis and Osiris, we see that Isis resonates with the number 5, and Osiris resonates with the number 6. That's also the reason they built the red and bent pyramids of Dashur, the pentagram and the hexagram. That is squaring the circle through sound musically. That is reaching the connection between the spirit and matter. That is how they achieved the Philosopher's Stone, enlightenment through sound. It is universal consciousness through which they reached atonement. If you split the word atonement, it means at one ment, at one mind. It's talking of unity consciousness. And the word alchemy and chemistry comes from Chem, which is the original name of Egypt, alchemy, Egypt. Even the emerald tablets of Teote is all to do with the Philosopher's Stone and how to achieve this consciousness. It's also why Lot's wife turned to salt, Through chemical ascension, the only thing that is left of the physical body is salt. That is why Lot's wife turned to salt. They're talking about alchemical ascension. So for the rest of the presentation, I'm going to take you around everywhere in the ancient world, the pyramids, Easter Island, Stonehenge, and others. And again, all ancient cultures were connected because they shared the same knowledge base. The ancients were telling us about enlightenment, enlightened consciousness, and the different ways to achieve it. And the different ways to achieve it has been encrypted within their many monuments. Even the white horse. A white horse is symbolic of a higher connection. A mountain and a hill is the same meaning. That is why we have the White Horse of Oxford, Wiltshire, and we see Christ on the back of a white horse. He's talking about our connection to a higher place. When we look at the Anunnaki, and I do actually do a presentation of the Anunnaki on its own, just the Anunnaki, but here we see normal humanity. They go through the wheel, the biblical wheel, the Merkabah, and they reach their higher self. A giant is symbolic of a higher than average insight that is talking you through the process of their consciousness raising. Even Atlantis. Atlantis is the island of Atlas. The 33rd vertebrae of the spine, Jacob's ladder, is known as Atlas. So when Plato talks of Atlantis, he talks of the island that rules 7. What is he saying? The pineal gland is situated between the two hemispheres of the brain, surrounded by the cerebrospinal fluid. It is an island. It is the island that rules 7, the 7 chakras, which is the pineal gland that rules the 7 chakras. Jesus Christ, I will talk about later if we get time at the last part of the talk, is not a physical person. Biblical interpretation. The secret is contained within the interpretation, and only certain people can interpret it correctly. When we have a belief in an outside force, we are allowing that outside force to take dominion over our life. We have lost sight of the power within. When we look at the biblical flood, that after 7 days the waters of the flood were upon the earth. Well, after the 7th chakra is reached, the Kundalini rises, the flood is upon us. It is the flood of spiritual energy as part of our awakening. And it sets to rest on the mountain of Arafat. Arafat means high ground or sacred land. It is really symbolically telling us of the realms of consciousness within our head. In 1953, we were told that Francis Crick and his team discovered the double helix of DNA in 1953. Whoever wrote the Bible many thousands of years ago knew about genetics even then. The Sumerians knew about genetics. The whole Sumerian story, Enki, Enlil, Alalu, Anu, is talking about genetics and how human genetics, the fertilization event, and how we progress through genetics and the advancement of genetics. That is the whole Sumerian Anunnaki story. The book of Genesis is really the book of genetics, the book of genes. They understood about genetics way before 1953, many thousands of years ago. Even churches and sacred buildings are made to the proportions of man, known as the canon. To know thyself is to know the universe. We are miniature universes. So church, the word church is related to Circe, which is the circle, and then we go into sacred geometry. We go to church to worship, which comes from the word workship. In other words, to work on our own inner vessel. So we look at the circle. Every known life form that we know of begins as a sphere, begins as a circle. Oneness becomes separation, becomes duality. When we interlink those two, it becomes the vesica Piscis. Now the ratio of the inside of the mandala of the vesica Piscis is 153. That is significant because the likes of the ministry of Jesus lasted 153 weeks. We have the symbol of Christianity, which comes from the vesica Piscis. And we also have Jesus catching 153 fish when he cast his net to the right-hand side, which is talking about the right side of the brain, the consciousness. 153 is the number of a master initiate. It is the number of divine knowledge. It's also encrypted within the Great Pyramid as well, which you will see later. So when we look at Mary Magdalene, when you translate her English name into Greek, it has a numerical value of 153. Mary Magdalene is the yoni, the doorway of life, female genitalia. The yoni, the womb, is the Holy Grail, the real Holy Grail inside us. It is the Graal, the vessel of God. That is the chalice. the transformation zone. Those who drink from the chalice are said to spiritually transform. That is why, that is the chalice, that is the womb inside the female. We even see it at the Vatican, the Vesica Piscis. There we see the Vesica Piscis. In the middle, you see the obelisk, which is the symbol of Osiris, the phallic. Underneath that phallic was a former goddess temple. What they're actually doing is uniting the feminine and the masculine within the Vesica Piscis. And the Feast of Mary Magdalene is celebrated on the 22nd of July, which is 22/7, which is Pi. It is the great androgynous light, the Christ and the Magdalene. Mary Magdalene gives proclamation of the teachings of Christ 83 times. The number 83 in Hebrew is bread. Now bread is quintessence, which is kundalini. It is sexual energy, which is known as the manna bread. The union of opposites that takes place in the bridal chamber, that means to attain Christhood. It is an alchemical marriage of opposites. So when the Bible says honour the inner divinity, honour your father and your mother, it's talking about honouring your masculine and your feminine within to achieve unified balance. And here we see Mary Magdalene inside the Vesica Piscis yoni, and we also see the Christ inside the yoni as well. The four beasts I will get to in a little while. The secret code for Christianity, the fish, as I said, comes from the Vesica Piscis. When we enter a church, we normally go under a lunette arch. Lunette means moon. The lunette arch is female genitalia. It is the Mary Magdalene. When we enter a church, we go through the series of the 7 chakras, entering from the yoni, the Mary Magdalene, and we go all the way top to enlightenment. Even when we sing a hymn, it comes from the word hymen, which again is talking about the same thing. Hymen was also the Greek god of weddings. All of these things, there is a reason for these things happening. That is why the church is known as the bride of Christ. The church is Mary Magdalene. When we look at the Mona Lisa, Mona, Madonna, Our Lady, and Lisa, La Isa, is Jesus in Arabic. So when people say that the Mona Lisa is androgynous, that is the androgynous of the union of male and female. Now, original Latin identifies Our Lady with Mary Magdalene. It is the equal balance with Jesus. It is the Christ and the Mary Magdalene. Even here we go back to the Isis and Osiris when we see the number 72 under the ark. Number 72 are the 72 transmission of God. When you add up all the letters of the Hebrew, Greek and English alphabets, it equals number 72. If you look at the side of the Mona Lisa, you will see the number 5 and the number 6, which again is the Philosopher's Stone. It is squaring the circle. Inner wisdom can be expressed through speech or through song, and that is why we have hymns, that is why we have resonance chambers inside churches and other places. Now, the Adam, which is divine intellect, and the Eve is our divine speech. When we amalgamate the two, we have the perfect human being. In Proverbs, it says, a wholesome tongue is a tree of life. If we misuse the 5th chakra, which is the throat chakra, which contains Adam's apple, if we misuse this lack of wisdom is the fall of man. Eden is the human body. It is the fall of man by misusing the Adam's apple, the 5th chakra. And words cast spells. That's why they're called spelling. We spell words because they're important. They cast spells. Now this is the vocal cord, which resembles the yoni, where a word is gestated. Now, again, I'll go into Isis in the Egyptian section, but Isis, the Egyptian goddess of motherhood, the first IS is the throat, and the second IS is genitalia. So Isis is the balance of the two. Isis also has connection to the pituitary gland, which again is Lemuria, which again is the Queen's Chamber of the Great Pyramid. The 9th commandment, thou shalt not bear false witness. In other words, you need to use truthful and effective speech in order to not misuse your Adam's apple. And this is the famous apple sign, which is basically the misuse of that speech, the misuse of the Adam's apple, the 5th chakra. Now in Hebrew, a darth, which is the throat, is the knowledge of the tree of life. We're now starting to develop the Garden of Eden tree of life story. In the Kabbalah, the throat is knowledge, the forbidden knowledge. So what are the ancients really telling us? Telling us of enlightenment through sound alchemy, and how we can reach the God state. So keeping with sound, ancient sites are also radio transmitters and receivers. Now the top one is a normal radio transmission. If you want to hide messages within sound, you create two wavelengths. If you want that sound to be of a higher octave, a higher communication, you make those wavelengths extremely close together, those two lines close together. Spirals slow down waves so that messages can be deciphered. And we see lots and lots of references to spirals in many ancient teachings. Now this is in Australia, the other side of the world. The Aborigines use what is known as a bora, which is a piece of string with a piece of wood on the end, and they spin it round in a circle, which they say is the voice of their ancestors. It gives off a frequency of 5.0 to 5.2 kilohertz. That is the same frequency that is found in crop circles. It is an intelligent diatonic ratio message that is slowed down by a spiral in order. It's a communication from somewhere hidden in sound. The Zulus call crop circles those two words that I can't pronounce, but it basically means writings of the gods. The Greeks call geometry frozen music. It's all to do with sound. The first European crop circle was discovered in 1590, but there are many ones older than that. So what did the ancient masters of wisdom know? So let me take you back to their world. When we look at lots of ancient sites, they're just like something's just up and left. They're derelict. Circles basically are crystalline sound harmonizers. That is why they're using crystalline monoliths. Stonehenge was a phonetic profiler that can decipher messages within sound waves that were enhancing their own DNA. It's almost like a monolithic enigma machine, where the British were deciphering German codes through sound and actually deciphering it into a language, and that way they knew where the German Navy was going to be, the submarines, the army, through taking sort of languages from sound. Even when we look at Da Vinci's Last Supper picture, it is a musical pentagram, the Last Supper. Right to left gives us 40 seconds of music. The number 40 in numerology is the power to lift you to a spiritual state. So Da Vinci has hidden musical code inside his painting. Each loaf of bread and the hands of each of the disciple is a musical note. Whichever way you go, right to left or left to right, Jesus is the seventh. The seventh note is the middle F, which is 349 hertz. So remember 349. The word seed is used 349 times in the Bible. Saviour means he who sows the seed. Again, I'll get onto that in a little bit later on. They were using at Stonehenge and other monoliths and the pyramids what is known as a tonal rill, which is a download through overtone singing, the harmonising of self and making the stones sing back. The monolithic tuning forks, which was balancing their vessels to a higher consciousness. You may recognise some of them people in this audience. Probably about 6 weeks ago we went to Stonehenge, where that was actually demonstrated by somebody who actually took that picture, where they were actually, the stones were singing back to us. The wise ones would download sacred knowledge through their crown chakra, through these kind of means, which happens to me on a regular basis, where I will get lots and lots of downloads of information. It is known as a hypercommunication that is most often encountered when you suddenly gain access to information that is outside your normal knowledge base. Some people experience that as inspiration, some people experience that as intuition. But DNA is also affected by these sound waves. When hypercommunication occurs, it is actually observed to change DNA. Now just remember the changing of DNA when I talk about the elongated skulls in a little while. It creates a phantom DNA effect. Now Russian scientists have basically said that in earlier times, humanity had been very strongly connected to the group consciousness and actually acted as a group. Our DNA can feed its proper data into the network. It can call up data from the network and can establish contact with other participants in the network, which again has already been sort of highlighted today. Remote healing, remote viewing or remote sensing is all part of this hypercommunication. It is known in Drunevella and Melchizedek circles as a morphogenetic grid. Whenever a great number of people focus their attention or consciousness on something, similar and ordered group consciousness is created. We then go back to the vacuum domains. The individual person must work on their own inner processes and maturity in order to establish a consciousness communication with their own DNA. So when we get the word ringtones of the mobile phones, it really comes from ringtones of the ancient past. It is a sound frequency. There we have the Presley Bluestones that are 33 feet in diameter. The number 33 is extremely important. It is the frequency of Christ consciousness. And 7 bands of energy that connect to the 7 chakras of the body, purify them, and they become an enlightened being. Most of these ancient sites are on the St Michael's ley line through southern England. We can see Avebury, Glastonbury, all them. They're basically put on top of concentrated areas of magnetic energy. It's also the George and the Dragon. When we overcome our lower desires, we become the sons of the Dragon. The sons of the Dragon are the Hierophants and the Hermetics, and they're the ones who understand sacred mysteries and esoteric principles. We become the Dragon Rider, which is another name for the Christ Force. Now, this is a Lichfield Cathedral, if anybody ever wants to go there. This is an effigy of a priest who is standing on top of the dragon. This tells you that he's a son of the dragon, he's an initiate. Even Arthur Pendragon, Pendragon means the dragon master. We then go into King Arthur, which again is symbolic. You walk up the avenue of Stonehenge and you come to the Heelstone. That signifies the end of individual consciousness. Once you get beyond the Heelstone, you are entering into the circle of unity consciousness. When you look at Stonehenge from the air, it gives you the alchemical symbol of gold, the philosopher's stone, the consciousness. The trilithon, a symbol, again, of unity consciousness that is created by individual consciousness. There were 30 of them. Again, number 30 is important spiritually, and the number 13 is important, and the number 7 is important. All of these mathematical designs have a frequency of consciousness. When we get to the solstice, at the point of lengthening or shortening, we reach the 0 point energy. Light and sound are intertwined with information that connects to DNA. They are receiving information from the sun. Each sacred site is aligned to a planet or a planetary orbit known as the planisphere. So we have Silbury Hill, which is basically aligned to Earth and Mars. We have Stonehenge itself, which is aligned to Saturn, because Saturn rules over bones, it rules over stones. When we get to Silbury Hill, which is the Earth and Mars, we can see the Silbury Hill, and we can also see the altar of witness on the Sidonian city on planet Mars. When we get a map overlay of the Sidonian city on Mars, and you put it over Avebury in Wiltshire, and there at the bottom you can actually see Silbury Hill, the mound. That is an exact map overlay of Avebury and Sidonian city on planet Mars. The face on Mars has a grid latitude of that big long number, which when divided by 2160, which is all to do with the zodiac and times needs zodiac sign, it equals that number, which is both the diameter and the location of Stonehenge. Whoever put the face on Mars is giving you the grid vector coordinates mathematically of how to find Stonehenge on Earth. This is the Mars-Henge on planet Mars, and obviously that is Stonehenge in Wiltshire. Even the Great Pyramid within it is giving the coordinates on the grid vectors mathematically of how to find the Sidonian city on Mars. When we move on to even more famous monoliths, the Heads of Easter Island, they're known as Maui, which again, Shimon, to listen, sound, listen. This is how the pineal gland receives information. So why are the heads above the ground and the bodies under the ground? When you detach yourself from the body, you create a consciousness. You are controlling the mind. You are fixing the mind on the higher self, which is enlightenment. That is why the heads are above the ground. When you actually look underneath the ground, you will see that they are full-size bodies. Detached from the body gives you that consciousness. The navel is the centre of internal alchemy, and this is where you can unify your body, spirit, and mind. Again, the number 33, which is really significant in ancient secrets. It's a master number of the initiates. They were 33 feet high, which again you will see in the cross section is consciousness. There are 1,000 heads which all face east in cardinal points. East is the direction of illumination and enlightenment. And the reason there are 1,000, same reason there are 1,000 petals of the crown chakra of Buddha. Number 1,000 is the highest number of consciousness. Then we get to this place, which means Old Mountain. A mountain, again, is a high connection. This was really an ascension school where they taught this sort of esoteric information on how to ascend to a higher place. It is all about enlightenment and consciousness. When we go to the other side of the world again, and we come to the South Americas and the Aztecs, and we analyse the word America, America, which means the land of the feathered serpent, which is Quetzalcoatl, or which means precious serpent, or its other name, Kulkakan. Ku is sacred, Kul is coccyx, and Kan is serpent. It is the sacred serpent at the base of the spine. It is Kundalini energy. The whole philosophy of Quetzalcoatl is telling you about your inner serpent, your inner dragon. Teotihuacan, which means the city of the gods. What it should really mean is where men become gods. It is the Ascension, the pyramid, the Ascension. Here we see all the dragons, the serpents going up, which again, the serpent is Kundalini, it is the Christ force. This is Ohio, the Serpent Mound, again referring to the same thing. Even in Hyde Park in London, Hyde comes from Hydra, which is the serpent, and there's a little part in Hyde Park known as the Serpentine. It appears throughout the ancient world and modern world in many places that you don't even realise. The serpent at the base of the spine, the Kundalini, the dragon, the serpent. It is the brazen serpent which Moses used to free the Israelites from captivity. The captivity, again in the Kabbalah, is the clip off, the abyss. That is where the Israelites were freed from the abyss, and they raised their consciousness. This is also where sexual energy is stored. It is the exodus, the way out. We start the lower desires, we destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, and we raise through the 7 islands that are controlled by Atlantis, the pineal gland. Even the word Israel, they don't actually behave in this way, but the word Israel means what it is to be the perfect spiritual man. And again, we go to Isis, which is the female. We go to Ra, which is the male. The union with God. Male and female unity with God. That is Israel. When we look at the Teflon, you will see 4 prongs. You will see Shin, which is the Dr. Spock hand symbol, which is Shin, the 3 primary forces of creation, added to a 4th prong, which gives us the Teflon. That is really a new world order through sexual energy, a new world through wisdom and knowledge, the wisdom and the knowledge of the initiate. The real promised land is not a physical thing. Promised land is code for an enlightened state. And when we look at the New Jerusalem in the book of Revelation to reveal, it is code for Christ consciousness. Moses is a metaphor for the illuminated mind. The burning bush is Kundalini energy, which has activated the pineal gland into cosmic awakening. The Red Sea is the water of death for those who are unconscious, but for those that are conscious, it is the baptismal water of rebirth and transcendence. Those who have the Gnosis, the enlightenment, will get through the Red Sea. Red is the preliminary stage of the Philosopher's Stone. It is the start of the consciousness raising frequency. Out of the Red Sea and into the wilderness means they came from unconsciousness into the promised land, from unconsciousness to enlightenment. It is the journey of your Moses, your enlightened state. The number 10 of the 10 Commandments, number 10, 1 is male, 0 is female. It is the balance of masculine and feminine. That is why it is number 10. It is the Kumara, the androgynous serpent, the balance of opposites. 10 Commandments are basically what is needed to free yourself from the currents of the left-hand path, which is the loss of consciousness, and to the right-hand path, which is the Godhead. It is called turning the coin of self. We do it many times throughout the day without even knowing. When we go heads or tails, we are saying, is it going to be the Godhead, or is it going to be the abyss that he sent the devil's tail into the abyss, heads or tails? Then we go again to the Mayans, another famous culture. I won't touch on them too much, but this is the pyramid of Tikal. Tikal comes from Tika, which means third eye. It also gives us the word Vatican, Vatica, which means third eye. That is why in the Vatican City you'll see lots of pine cones. Pine cones give us the word pineal. People have found liquid mercury in this pyramid and still don't know what it means. It means that it is Mercury, it is the first spirit of alchemical ascension. They were practicing alchemical ascension to the gold cap of the pyramid, which is the gold of the Philosopher's Stone, which is why the cap of the Great Pyramid was once gold. It is the completion of the magnum opus, the great work of self, the alchemical ascension. And when we get to this place in Turkey, we can see there the translation, Hadi Kundalini, delivering Kundalini. This, in the same fashion as Stonehenge, is a resonance chamber to raise consciousness. Now to myth and legend, the King Arthur and Excalibur is also talking about consciousness. You'll see that Arthur was the only one that could remove the sword from the stone. He was the only one that could extract the knowledge from the pineal gland. Only the chosen can see the sacred mysteries. When we look at Merlin, we're talking of inner alchemy, inner wizardry that transforms us to a place of enlightened consciousness. Arthur's castle, built with the fire of the dragon, again referring to Kundalini, the serpent. Avalon comes from Avalok, which means the place of apples, which obviously has connection to Adam and Eve. When you slice an apple widthways, it reveals the pentagram, the number 5, the symbols of the mystery, the higher consciousness. That is why the apple is in Garden of Eden. That is why Arthur lives in Avalok, Avalon. And when we look at the sexual polarity of masculine sexual energy, we have the 4 rivers. When we add the male polarity and the female polarity, we have the 4 rivers of Eden, which are, Eden is the human body. These 2 currents are the Ida and the Pingala, which are the 2 witnesses of revelation. They are also the 2 biblical olive trees, the Ida and the Pingala, the 2 currents of the body. Now we're going to go to my favourite place, Egypt. In physicality, we have an animal soul, which comes from anima, which is Latin for soul. Humans who have purified their animal souls are known as holy creatures that relate to the Sphinx. You will see in the Bible, they have the 4 beasts, or the 4 creatures, which is that. That is really symbolising those who have purified their animal soul to become that human consciousness. When we see Egyptian statues and other statues around the world, you will notice that their left foot is usually forward. The left foot forward is the symbol of the emetics, which are basically those with specialist knowledge. We're now going into the realms of the mystery schools of Egypt, which spread all across the world, the Kabbalah, Christianity, in a hidden, secret way. When we see Egyptians with the heads, the sparrowhawk of Horus, for example, it is symbolic of a higher level of mind. He has reached a high level of mind. The head of the falcon is the highest level of the objective reasoning that any initiate again, can develop. It's called the Anklad. When someone reaches Aklad, they receive the head of the falcon. This is symbolic of someone who has reached the Godhead. Isis, Osiris and Horus represent the unfoldment through initiations of the true human being that must be born inside us. And again, that Trinity is important in the Great Pyramid. Here we see the Jed pillar, the spinal column, the Jacob's ladder, the 33, Atlantis. This, when we elevate again our serpent Kundalini, it leaves Lower Egypt and it goes up the spine into the mind. Anybody that knows Egyptian mythology, you will know that Osiris was chopped up into 14 pieces. The only part that Isis couldn't find was the phallic. That is symbolic of only the phallus was missing, which means that the resurrection of the master was without lust. It was the control of the sexual energy, without lust, without the phallic. The cross keys of the Church of the Vatican and the cross of Osiris is the union of opposites across the centralised place, the heart. And again, back to number 153 from the Christ, from the Mary Magdalene story. When you get to the entrance of the Great Pyramid, it is on the 17th course level. If you add all the numbers up from 1 to 17, it equals 153. 153 can become 1 plus 5 plus 3, which equals 9, which is the number of enlightenment, divine completedness. That is the entrance of the Great Pyramid. When you reach the entrance, you will see the chevron, which in Hebrew is shibor, which means the connection or the place of connection. They are symbolising as you enter, It is the place where the worlds connect, the physical and spiritual in harmony. Again, 153, when you go inside the Grand Gallery, there are 153 steps, and it is 153 feet long. 153, the master initiate number. When you get the height of the Great Pyramid, and you divide it by 153, you get pi, which gives you 528 hertz, which is a consciousness raising frequency that appears in the pyramids time and time again. 153 is also the 17th course level of the entrance to the Great Pyramid. 153 is the 17th triangular number. There are 9 pyramids. When you do 17 times 9, that number appears yet again, 153. If only you knew the magnificence of 3, 6 and 9, you would have the keys to the universe. There are 9 pyramids in sets of 3, 6 and 9. When you look at King Tut and his mask, this is really consciousness. The gold, again, the philosopher's stone. The cobra's spread head, the cerebellum, which deals with equilibrium and balance within the brain, is the sex force that has lifted up and enlivened all occult centres of the brain. Here we have the 2 hemispheres of the cerebellum. Here we have the vermis, which separates the 2 hemispheres of the cerebellum. Vermis means serpent. Here we have the Ida and Pingala, which when they reach the 6th chakra, the 3rd eye, in a state of balance, it creates an awakening of a large proportion. Again, we see the black eyeliner of the 3rd eye, and we see the earrings in the Egyptian pharaoh, which again is the union of masculine and feminine. Sexual energy used for the beast will prevent the human being from being born within. It's basically the animalistic nature that is kept at base by the correct use of sexual force. We look at the Eye of Horus, which is the eye where everything merges as consciousness. It is the eye of wisdom. That is the Eye of Horus inside the brain. Even when we see the logo of the Mini, again we have the wings of balance, the cerebellum. Cerebellum means little brain, the Mini, and the black circle in Egyptian terms is known as the Aten. That is the equivalent of the Hindu Bindi, which marks the exact location of the 3rd eye on the forehead. It is also the cave of Brahma. It is also the abode of Allah, where the 3 sacred rivers meet, the Ida, the Pingala and the Sushumna. And it is also the eye of Odin, the one eye of Odin. He exchanged one eye at the well in exchange for knowledge. That is the one eye, that is the inner eye, the pineal gland. Now for more on the Great Pyramid. Pyramid, the fire of the god in the mind. Even the word pharaoh means great mind. It has taken us to a place of consciousness. Here we see the ram. Ram basically means mind light. It's why we get the word Ramesses. That is the Lamb of God. That is the wisdom of the ram. That is the light of the mind. Now this is the drawing that I got the wife to do for me. When you get the Great Pyramid and you put a map overlay of the human head facing north, the Great Pyramid faces due north, because due north, the north gate is the pineal gland. If you put the human head over it, you will see that where the pineal gland is situated is the king's chamber. Where the queen's chamber is situated is the pituitary gland, Isis and Osiris. You'll also see that little tower. Just bear in mind that tower, the thalamus. Here we see it again. Now, when electromagnetic vortex enter the temple, electrons are split from the magnetic waves into 3 separate harmonics. Those 3 harmonics resonate with the 3 chambers of the Great Pyramid. Scientists, Egyptologists, scholars are still scratching their head as to what the subterranean chambers of the Great Pyramid really mean. They are representing the subconscious mind, or the subterranean mind. The subconscious mind that feeds the conscious mind. That is what the subterranean chambers of the Great Pyramid are really telling you. Again, there's that tower, and mainstream calls them relief chambers. But again, when you go to China or Japan, they are known as the Shinto, which comes from Shen, the gods, and the Teo, the path or the way. It is the path or the way to the gods, which is your higher consciousness. We see some of the shafts are facing star frequencies. Again, Sirius, Isis, the pituitary gland, the star chamber of Isis, which is the pituitary gland, capitalises on the star frequencies of the 33 degree of initiation. Here we see the pineal gland, Orion, Osiris, and we also see the serpent, which again is the dragon, the serpent, the wisdom. As I've been shown, is they used to travel from place to place by opting for certain frequencies. And by tuning into certain frequencies, they were able to appear in certain locations in the same way that we would use an elevator. Press floor 16 or floor 17, they were doing it through frequency. The human body has meridians, has ley lines, has energy centres, but so does the land. When you look at the African prime meridian, you will see that Giza is situated in the third eye, and you'll see that Alexandra is the crown chakra on the meridians of the African prime meridian. Even the location of the Great Pyramid is representing the third eye. And again, you go into the amplification chambers of the King's Chamber. Again, it's all to do with sound and resonance. The wise ones, the masters of sounds, were able to access sacred knowledge. And again, when we look at birdmen all around the world, it is really telling you of the process of opening to higher wisdom and knowledge. And here we can see the Anunnaki, here we can see Egypt, different places. The vulture is symbolic of the transmuter of lower energies. Even in modern day pop culture, Egypt goes through Parliament, goes through American Parliament, British Parliament, Paris, London. Even in pop culture, this is the symbol of Isis, the left eye, and the symbol of Horus is the right eye. Now for the mystery of the elongated skull and the transmutation of DNA. Again, the origin of that is in sound. We have the upper chambers of the Great Pyramid, the small chambers at the top, and these shafts were designed as receivers of the lowest frequencies of infrasound. Infrasound is 0.5 to 10 hertz. Infrasound is sound that we can't normally hear. This was at the precise place of the shaft openings which was affecting the transmission of sound waves, and here are some of them small shafts in the Great Pyramid. The air shafts are basically harmonic dimensions that specify wavelengths, storing of sound waves. It is sound alchemy. They were acoustic resonance systems, a psychoacoustic, again raising the mind through sound, which gave them genetic enhancement and consciousness balancing. It transmutes their DNA, which is why when there have been samples taken from the elongated skulls, it appears to be DNA that is not human. It's because sound has transmuted it. They place babies into the shaft as they open up into the upper chamber. It's all to do with cranial augmentation, which is changing the shape, fetal gestation and natal biorhythmic entrainment inside the womb, which was creating elongated skulls. Infrasound stimulation, which also caused genetic enhancement. And again, we look at the Great Pyramid and we look at the triphalamic entrainment. It is amalgamating the three aspects of the third eye. It's a DNA and nativity chamber for connecting and stabilising the biorhythms of mother and child at separation at birth, all under the umbrella of the magnetics of the Great Pyramid. We see the sarcophagus, the dimensions are actually calibrated to the heartbeat of a newborn child. That is actually deliberate, so water, liquid could actually pour out. That is not a chip that's fallen off. And again, we have cones, a dynamic sound effect. That is why we have a cone-shaped elongated skull. It's all to do with sound dynamics. And this is a conic sound wave. As a jet engine comes out of a sound wave, again, we have a cone. It is the same principle. So now for the final part of the talk, the most famous so-called man to have ever walked the earth. It is symbolic of what I've already said. So who was Jesus Christ? So the story of Christ is not a new story. By the time we actually get to Mary and Jesus, the same story has occurred 15 times in history when we get to that particular point. The story of Jesus is basically a Christian version of much earlier interpretations. We have Pope Leo X that said it has served us well, this myth of Christ. In 2017, we have the current Pope, Pope Francis, telling us that Jesus is metaphorical, not literal. These are the heads of one of the biggest religions in the world telling you the truth, but people are not picking up on what they're saying. The story of Jesus is the story of the sacred sexual force, which again is Kundalini. The child is born inside us through solar alchemy, which is the correct use of sexual force. It is the outcome of our own alchemical work. The child is light when a certain level of initiation is reached. The story is symbolic. Now, Jesus was the son of Joseph. Joseph hides Io, which is basically the balance of the Divine Father and Mother in the union that creates the child. He's the Yesod, which corresponds to sexual energy. So Joseph is the sexual energy in the union of the Mary. In Latin, Maria hides Ram and Io, which again is the light of the mind and the sexual energy, the Mother Mary. We have to read Ma backwards as Ram. Ra is the fire, and the letter M, Mem, in Hebrew is water. It is the fire and water. It is the masculine and feminine polarity within inside us. That is the Mary and Joseph of the Bible. The Black Madonna, or the Black Isis, is symbolic of the fire hidden within us, the charcoal that needs to be resurrected. The cross, the Christian cross, is really the phallic and the sitis, which is the two opposite genitalia resting upon each other, the sexual union of masculine and feminine, the cross. When we look at the cross of St. Peter, the upside down cross, and when Christians or the Pope or anyone does this in public, they are symbolising the upside down cross of St. Peter. That is the ninth sphere. That is where we have to use the correct sexual energy to escape the ninth sphere. That is the Christian cross in public. Peter, Petrus, rock, hard to make hard, is the erection. Get your rocks off is to ejaculate. It's talking about sexual energy. Even when we see this at the Vatican, this is symbolic of the ninth sphere, where we actually reconcile and amalgamate our inner darkness and light. It is in the grounds of the cortil, which means enclosed, the della, the noble, pigna, the pine cone, pineal. It's talking about that sexual energy, the ninth sphere that we must conquer to escape the captivity of the Israelites. The story of Jesus set in the age of Pisces, which is the age of deception, but it also symbolises the new initiate who receives the truth in an age of deception. They get the knowledge, we get the stories. The Hafiz, when you go back to Egypt, tell you that sexual energy is birthed in the solar plexus, which is Bethlehem. That is our inner Christ fire that is born in Bethlehem, becoming the primal force or the primal power in the ascent of consciousness. The Gnostics say that a virgin means to transform sexual energy through scientific chastity, abstention. That is where chastity really comes from. A virgin is someone who knows how to use that sexual force. Our matter then becomes pregnant with the fire of our inner virgin, our chastity, our Christ. Jesus was a carpenter. Carpenter in Aramaic, Semitic, comes from the word nanja, which means serpent of wisdom. The Christ, the carpenter, is really the serpent of wisdom. And in Judaism, the Jewish Messiah is known again, that word, the holy serpent. Now, this sexual energy can be used for compassion, the Christ, the ascending serpent, or it can be used for passion, which is the descending serpent. That is the kingdom of heaven, that is the kingdom of earth. This passion of that sexual energy makes that serpent a negative polarity, and it is the descent of the serpent. It is the descent of Satan from the heavens to earth. It is the misuse of sexual force that turns round that into a descending serpent into the kingdom of earth. So Saturn, the satanic consciousness, which is all to do with lower sexual desires. The gates of hell are the gonad glands, which open and close to release semen. It is our lower nature, the gates of hell. When we look at the root chakra, which again is the lowest chakra, the lower chakra of desire, it is known as the underworld, it is hell. When we have the fire of Kundalini that arrests around the base of the spine, it is the fire of the root, it is the fire of hell. Hell is not a real place. In Islam, this is known as salvation from the hellfire. It is how we rise from the base of the spine up into the crown chakra. Sexual force as passion makes us horny, the devil's horns. It is the misuse, the satanic consciousness that makes us misuse this sacred energy. In Hebrew, Satan is written in 3 letters: Shin, which means fire, Teth, which means serpent, and Yesod, Joseph, means sexual force. It is the sexual force of the fire of Kundalini. That is really Satan in Hebrew. Devil comes from diabolos, which means to divide and abolish. The tail downwards, the devil's tail, means downwards into the abyss. It is the Kunda buffer. It is the descent into the abyss of satanic consciousness. It takes us away from paradise, the place beyond division. In alchemy, Saturn, is the base metal, and the sun, the cosmic Christ, is the gold of enlightenment. Even in Egypt, they are telling you the same thing with that solar Christ, that solar consciousness. Lent, which is light lent from the sun, 40 days of renewal, 40, the number that takes you to a spiritual place, the number 40. So man is really the Antichrist. By the suppression of that sacred power, by the suppression of the Christ, we become the Antichrist. The bounds of Christ against all practices of the day were not broken. That is symbolic that Satan rules the bounds. So therefore, by Christ having now bounds broken on the cross, signifies that Satan has now dominion over our Christ. And Inri, above the cross, Ignis, not sure whatever that says, basically means the fire renews nature incessantly. It is the solar fire, it is the Christ force within us. Sin, which comes from the Greek hamartia, which means missing the mark, which is the same in archery. When you miss the bullseye, you are missing the mark. You are sin, you are born with original sin. Adam is returned to dust, and dust is inner ignorance. By missing the mark, by committing sin, we basically take ourselves down to ignorance. So, my people are destroyed for the lack of knowledge. Those with knowledge, the Gnostics, are free from sin. Those with knowledge of this are not sinful. They have the knowledge. The Holy Trinity, the Father that resides in the eye of wisdom, the pineal gland. We have the Son, the eternal Christ who exists in everyone, and the Holy Spirit, which is the fire of Kundalini. The dove is a symbol of higher divine knowledge. That is the Holy Trinity. And then we look at the Lord's Prayer, which is telling us the exact same information. So number 10, again, divine balance, which is 5 and 5, number 10. But it's also 55, which is divine knowledge, completed man. So our Father, the abyss, the satanic sexual energy, who heart in heaven, the Kundalini force that is raised through the highest chakras to heaven, the upper chakras of heaven. Hallowed be thy name. Ancient scholars said that the lower Saturnalian desires was a path to sainthood. Hallowed, halo be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven, which is the generative sexual force of earth, which is the lower chakras, and the higher chakras, the seventh chakra is seventh heaven. That is the kingdom of God within you. The manna, give us this day our daily bread. Quintessence, Kundalini sexual energy, Sanskrit of manna, which is what Moses fed the Israelites. The Israelites escaped captivity, escaped the abyss through the brazen serpent, Kundalini. I am the bread of life. Lord means bread giver. Forgive those who trespass against us. Trespass is to do something or act in a way that is not morally acceptable. In other words, wasting the sacred seed. And lead us not into temptation, which is the satanic lower desires, sexual desires. It is the better use of sexual energy with compassion, which is the Christ, not with passion, which is Satan. That is that part of the Lord's Prayer. And obviously the world is full of lust. That is why it is the satanic consciousness of lower sexual desire. Deliver us from evil. When you look at the word evil reversed, it is live. Live now, live right, live in the now. And the Egyptians told us this by the Achalians, which is basically yesterday and tomorrow. Enlightenment is in the now. Live for the now. The word Amen, again that number comes up, number 33. If you add up all the letters of Amen, it equals number 33. So Jesus is actually a title, not a name, and Jesus is a title meaning Saviour. Again, Saviour, he who sows the seed. Sperm means seed. It is the fish of the waters. It is the sea of men. It is the semen. Jesus' work starts his father's work age 12, which is the age of puberty. Life in the water, sperm oiled, anointed by semen, is the Christ. He was the only begotten son. Begotten comes from monogene, which means only one. Only one sperm fertilizes the egg. In Sanskrit, the morning star, planet Venus, means shukra, it means seminal sexual secretion. Jesus is associated with Venus, the morning star, Venus, venereal, sexual again. Semen, Saria, to sow, anointed one, the Christos. Now the retrograde of Venus lasts for 40 days and for 40 nights, which is how long Jesus spent in the wilderness. And we have Lucifer, which again is code for a sexual power. It is the Venetic initiation, which is the middle path, which is balance. Lucifer is a sexual force. And here we see that symbolised by the shell of the Pope. That is symbolic of Lucifer, that is symbolic of Venus. John the Baptist, who lost his head, is really sperm detaching from its tail, losing its head. Even Noah, which comes from the Hebrew words nunchet, which means life in the water, is talking about the creation of a child. Yeshua, which means salvation, which is the salt, which are the spinal fluids, which are the river Jordan of the body. Again, Jesus was baptized age 30. The number 30 in numerology are the forces of spiritual enlightenment and a connection to a supreme power. Here is the river Jordan, and when that spinal fluid is ionized, it allows Kundalini to rise, transforming consciousness. That is the river Jordan of baptism. Now, when we see baptism, it is really the elevation from the waters below, the Mayhim, to the waters above, the Shemahim, poured over the crown chakra. We are basically taking the waters of earth to the waters of heaven. And here we see in Hebrew, Shemahim, heaven. You take those two letters and it becomes the waters of earth, the Mayhim. Those who from heaven to earth came, as the Anunnaki will tell you. And when we look at the firmament that's in the Bible, it's really talking about the expanse between the upper waters and the lower waters. The child are really the babies of initiation, the spiritually young in the teaching that are entering into that particular teaching of initiation. And the water on the head again, the symbol, the need to understand, and the cross is the sexual union, which is balance, which creates the initiate's enlightenment. Sperm not ejaculated enhances sexual energy to be used in consciousness, transferring it upwards into the solar plexus, Bethlehem. Sexual sublimation, it is talking about celibacy, the retention of sexual sacred energy. And here, for his seed remaineth in him, celibacy. Many priests don't understand that this is actually the origin of celibacy, which is sexual sublimation. However, they are mistaking it for and replacing it with basically sexual oppression, which is leading to the many things that we're seeing in the news now. Instead of transmuting that sexual energy, they're actually oppressing it, which is creating crimes. 10% of this sexual energy is actually retained by the cells of the body, and that is where we get the origin of tithing, 10%. Crucified on the cross. To crucify also means to subdue one's appetite, again relating to the sacred sexual energy of the Christ within. The Christ seed at the Mensa. Mensa means mind and table. So Christ is in the mind with the 12. The 12 indicates the end of something or the whole. It's basically also the mathematical harmony vertically and horizontally of universal sound. When we get Christ and we add Christ, it gives us the number 13, which is the passage to a higher level, the number of eternal return. That is why we have Christ and 12, the number 13. And again, the divine human is one who is in control of his thoughts. Here we see thoughts in the guise of Teote of Egypt. Thank you. Teote of Egypt, which is thought. The baboon is symbolic of a master initiate. The divine human is in control of his thoughts. And all of this, of course, happens in Golgotha, the walls of Jericho, the place of skulls. But we must get over our doubting Thomas, our Didymus, our twin mind of duality in order to have unity consciousness. And again, the number 33, Jesus died age 33 in 33 AD. 33 hertz is the frequency of Christ consciousness, or we have 33 degrees of masonry. The word Amen is number 33. NASA's launch pad is X33. It comes in a lot, 33 vertebrae of the spine, which then leads to Atlantis. Ironically, Jacob had 33 sons. He ruled Israel for 7 years, the 7 chakras, and on the 33rd mention of Jacob in the Bible, it refers to Jacob's ladder, which is the spine that has 33 vertebrae. It is all encoded information. Again, 33 degrees of Freemasonry. Our spiritual journey ends with full spiritual enlightenment, the crown of thorns. That indicates the end of our earthly spiritual journey. It is the code for the Son of God. The empty tomb, Plato's cave, escaping ignorance and darkness into the ascent into true light. That is really the Christ consciousness, because the cave cuts us off from that true light. Now, when we have Jonah in the belly of the whale, when we have the 3 days of darkness in Egypt, when we have Jesus in the tomb for 3 days, it really comes from the 3 woes, which are initiation. Day 1 is the 9th sphere, which we've already discussed, which is the belly of the whale, where we rebuild our temple of Jerusalem twice. The 2nd day is the Jebera, with the energy that makes way for the new, penetrates the initiates and destroys the ego to become the resurrected master of light and fire. And on day 3 is penetration into the mysteries and the transformation out of the belly of the whale and into the light, ending 3 initiation days. That is the symbology of Jonah in the belly of the whale. Jonah, the pineal gland, and the whale is the Malkuth, the body. The 3 days of darkness in Egypt is the same story, and the word resurrection again means to use again. It is the resurrection of our own inner Christ force. So Jesus walking on water. I've already said about turning water into wine, which is unconsciousness into higher consciousness. But when Jesus walks on water in Galilee, Galilee derives from the feminine noun Golgoloth, which means the head or the skull, Golgotha, or the masculine noun, which is Gilgal, which means the wheel, which is higher consciousness, where we get the word Google. The chariot and the wheel, the Merkabah, again higher consciousness, and the wheel within wheel is the higher thought. We need to unclean the 7 unclean spirits, which are the 7 blocked chakras that prevent our Christ from ascending. We must become one of the biblical 144,000, which are the petals of each of the 7 chakras, which equals 144,000. It is the pure, enlightened human being. The rapture of Christ. Rapture is a transition. We are transitioning ourselves to the Christ frequency. The initiate who passes is known as the twice born. It is the second coming. It is our own second coming. And at the time of the initiation, the shell is broken and man emerges into philosophic regeneration. We become the enlightened, we become a good shepherd. And Jesus walking amongst the 7 candlesticks, again, he's talking about the 7 chakras and the secretion of the pineal gland, which is a white and brown secretion, which has been found in the sarcophagus in Egypt and is stored at the British Museum in London. He's really talking about secretion, the secret, the secretion within the endocrine system. It is the biblical land of milk and honey, the brown and white secretion of the pineal gland. That is the promised land, enlightenment. By doing so, we escape the illusion of the square, the imposition of third-dimensional structure. That is a Da Vinci picture of the illusion of the square. We then activate the Ark of the Covenant, which is the human brain, which is a receptor, receiver of information. That is the hemispheres of the brain. That is the brain itself. It is gold, because gold is the philosopher's stone, the colour of enlightenment. We become an enlightened being by doing these practices that the ancients are encrypting in their ancient monuments. So on that note, just remember that whatever we've been talking about today, all of the speakers have touched upon the same thing. This is taking you back to the ancient world, which is really modern science, is thousands of years behind the information that they were encrypting in their monuments, in their scriptures, in their monoliths. They were telling you what modern day science is now just touching upon, but they were hiding it in their monuments. The whole reason for these monuments was to raise their Godhead, their consciousness state. And through these various practices is how they were achieving it, through sound, through the use of sexual energy, which was raising their Christ. Every one of us is Jesus Christ. Every one of us is Mary Magdalene. Every one of us is every character of the Bible. Every one of us has the potential to be an initiate of the mystery schools. That is what society is keeping from us, and it is keeping us imprisoned within the 5, basically, senses of awareness. People need to see outside of the 5, to step outside of the material, to rejoin the ether, which is what the ancients were really telling us. So thank you very much for your time today. Thank you very much for your time during my presentation as well.